In Proverbs chapter 2, we see the life-changing wisdom of God. There's some revelation about God's wisdom here that will really help you. I pray that your understanding of God's wisdom grows through this beginner's Bible study. By the end of this, you'll know how to study the Bible better, and you'll gain some useful Bible study skills. If you're new to the Bible, I believe that this beginner's Bible study guide will especially bless you. Let's jump into Proverbs chapter 2. We find ourselves in Proverbs chapter 1, starting in verse 31. We probably should get some context, okay? When you read the Bible, make sure you get as much context as possible. Solomon has just described how the foolish sinner who rejects wisdom over and over and the counsel of God and the fear of the Lord, they descend into further depravity, and then when it comes down to it and they are dealing with the consequences of their own rebellion and sin, they all of a sudden want wisdom. Hey, bail me out. And Solomon said, yeah, but you're going to eat the fruit of your way. Wisdom is personified here as a woman who's kind of standing against these sinners and saying, I tried to warn you, like I tried to bail you out and keep you from this, but you kept going headstrong right into sin. So we find ourselves in verse 31. Therefore, these foolish sinners that, were described as not wanting knowledge or fear of the Lord or wisdom or counsel or reproof, they will eat the fruit of their way, which is another way of saying the consequence or the result of their way. And so the way of life here becomes like seed, right? Every decision you make is like a seed you're planting in the ground of your life, and then you will ultimately eventually feel or experience rather the fruit or the result of that seed being fully grown, and the fruit will be that specific consequence and experience. So because they did that, they'll eat the fruit of their way and have their fill of their own devices. What's interesting is that Solomon chooses to use this language of like eating and filling their bellies. And we should probably ask why. Like, it's not just random. The poetic way that Solomon explains the consequences of sin, I believe, is very intentional, because earlier in the chapter we saw that the fools, they're like wanting to fill themselves up to the full with pleasure, with wealth, with gain, at the expense of others. They're willing to kill and sabotage other people's lives in order to get whatever it is that their, metaphorical bellies or even physical bellies are desiring. And so, okay, you're going to get what you wanted, and it's not going to be what you thought. You're going to be filled with your own devices. So the devices and the way here are essentially the same idea. For, or because, now let's explain why this is. The simple are killed by their turning away. And you're like, that's pretty rough. What do you mean they're turning away? This turning away refers to a constant rebellion and rejection of God's word and wisdom and counsel. They just refuse. They never, ever bow the knee to God or even consider the wisdom he's wanting to share. They never live like God is the king of the universe. They do whatever they want. And so by constantly turning away, these simple end up being killed, right? They end up destroying their own lives in the process, and the complacency of fools destroys them. That's what's interesting is the word complacency. I don't know what it is in the Hebrew, right? But in the English, that's quite the word. And these people, they're not just aggressively against the wisdom and the knowledge of God. Some people are just straight up indifferent, right? There's different categories and levels of rejection. Some people are just indifferent. They just don't care. They're complacent in their ways. They're lazy. There's no sense of, desire for the things of God. And because of that, they're destroyed, okay? But whoever listens, so now we have a different kind of person. We've described the foolish sinner for the last, many verses. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure, will be at ease without dread of disaster, okay? This is very different than the foolish sinner who is bringing disaster upon themselves, and they don't even know it. They're planting seeds in the ground that's going to produce the fruit of disaster. They're not even aware. Whereas the people who are listening to the voice of wisdom, changing their lives, course-correcting, heeding that counsel, they're going to dwell secure. So I might want to ask, hey, what does it mean to dwell secure? Are we talking about physical safety? Are we talking about just an emotional stability? Are we talking about a spiritual security, like I'm safe in the hands of God? He has my soul. What does it mean to dwell secure and be at ease? Does this mean that they never see any trouble, any tribulation? Because I think of John 16:33. Jesus says, in this world you'll have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world, right? And they will have no sense of disaster. And I think the disaster here is referring back to the disaster that the foolish sinner brings upon themselves. If you go back to verse 27, it says, terror will strike you like a storm. Calamity will come like a whirlwind. So whatever it is that sin leads you into, yeah, when you live obedient to God, you'll be spared from those consequences. You'll be spared from that kind of disaster that you bring upon yourself. And this is all framed up within the context. When you read the Bible, try not to lose sight of the overall point that is being made in that chapter or that text. The main point is this: wisdom is calling out. Some people will heed her voice, other people will not. And there are consequences, or rather a kind of life that will result from both groups if you continually reject the voice of God. And this can look a number of different ways, okay? This can be expressed in a variety of ways, but when you reject the voice of God over and over, you descend into further depravity and disaster upon yourself. When you heed the voice of God, though, and listen, you're spared from that, okay? And wisdom is essentially offering you, crying out in the streets, the marketplaces, anywhere you can imagine. Wisdom is essentially saying, I would like to protect you from disaster. Come under me. Heed my voice and my counsel. Learn from me. Learn to fear the Lord. Now chapter 2 opens, my son, if you receive my words. So it's back to Solomon, right? Wisdom was speaking, personified as a woman. Now we're back to Solomon, who stands as the male voice of wisdom. If, which means it's conditional, you receive my words and treasure up my commands with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom, right? And then it'll go on to say, and incline your heart to understanding. And yes, if you call out all these different ways of saying, if you have or reach for wisdom and counsel, right? So I should probably ask, is it just that I need to receive the words of wisdom? You know, is it just this? Question mark. Or is this also a necessary prerequisite, right? Do I also need to treasure up the commandments? Not just Solomon's commandments, but as he's talking to his son, he's pointing back at the law of God. These are God's commandments being talked about, you know, through Solomon. And he's saying, if you treasure them up, make your ear attentive. Apparently there's going to be a kind of benefit attached to that. So we should be asking, is it just receiving? Is treasuring up the commandments of God part of what it means to receive? And being attentive to wisdom? Like which order, what is the order of these things? Am I attentive, and then I receive, and then I treasure? Are these all different ways of saying the same thing? You know, to treasure up, to receive is to be open and attentive, right? Not just like, oh, like tolerate what you're saying, but I'm attentive. I'm actively engaged in listening to what you're saying because it's serious. Making your heart or your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. So we have the ear and we have the heart here. The hearing and the heart are essentially active when it comes to receiving wisdom. The heart is postured towards receiving the wisdom of God. The ear is open and inclined to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight. So it's like, whoa, wisdom is not the only one calling out and crying out for us to heed her voice. But we ought to call out for the insight she wants. So it's not just she wants to give us. So it's not just like wisdom is on the active and we're on the passive. It's we're both active. I want the wisdom that God is actively offering me. And if you raise your voice, remember wisdom was raising her voice in the previous chapter, in the marketplaces, in the streets. Yeah, raise your voice for understanding. So again, this is not just, I'm neutral, I'm indifferent. If wisdom comes, I'll be open. But like you actively, passionately desire for it. You're pursuing it. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and I have some free gifts for you on our website at abovereproachministry.com. Maybe you want to learn how to study the Bible. We have free Bible classes just for you. Are you maybe a newer believer? Go ahead and check out our Christianity 101 Foundations course. Maybe you hate videos. Well, we have a podcast, so you can listen to all of our messages on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Maybe you want to join or start a discussion group. Check out our map of all the current armed discussion groups all around the world. And do you maybe live near Greenville, South Carolina? If you do, you should check out our church. Visit movementchurchsc.com for more information. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can snag a copy of my book, Fruitful, or head over to the donate page and donate through debit or credit card, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or even mail a check to P.O. Box 509, Inman, South Carolina. And if you want to make a ministry connection, feel free to reach out to me on our website. All right, I know that was a lot, but I'm done. So let's get back to the video. Understanding insight. The heart apparently is involved in understanding and gaining insight. And if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, and you're like, oh, now we're just getting a little like dramatic. This is some exaggerated language. I think the point is that wisdom is incredibly valuable. It is like hidden treasure that we're digging up and searching for. We are excavating. We are actively looking for the wisdom, the treasure of wisdom hidden within our world and in our lives that God discloses to us and reveals to us. We want that. But apparently there has to be a value for it. So I should probably ask, why is wisdom compared to silver? You know, the understanding, the insight. Is there a difference between insight and understanding? Why am I supposed to be longing for it like silver? Why search for it like treasure, right? We're going to see in the next chapter, specifically, chapter 3, wisdom is compared to gold and precious jewels and rubies. In other words, wisdom is priceless. Wisdom is more valuable, spiritually and eternally speaking, more valuable than anything this world could offer you. And so instead of searching for money and dedicating yourself to a pursuit of money and wealth and gain and success, like go after wisdom. And apparently, by doing so, you will end up attached to wisdom will come a healthy level of all those other things, right? So that it doesn't destroy you. So hidden treasures, then. So we finally get to the result. We saw the ifs. If you do this, if you do this. And I'm sure as you read through verse 1 through 4, you're like, can you get to the point, Solomon? Like, if you call out, if you incline your heart, if you want it, if you raise your voice, if you receive, if you treasure up, if you make your heart attent. It's like, we get it. Just get to the point. But Solomon really wants to emphasize all the different ways of explaining this one thing. Desire for and pursue wisdom, and you will find it. If you do not, it doesn't mean you won't find opportunities to gain wisdom. Not at all. Wisdom comes knocking at your door sometimes, very often. But we are often passing by lots of wisdom throughout our everyday lives. Just in our world, God has placed, hidden pockets of wisdom for us to glean and receive as we, navigate life by his spirit and truth. So here's the result. Then you'll understand the fear of the Lord. And you'll find the knowledge of God. And here's a question I have. Solomon, this whole time, I thought that's what you've been offering me. I thought you were telling me to fear the Lord. I thought you were telling me to know God. I thought that's what you're offering me. But apparently what Solomon is offering will lead to the fear of God and the knowledge of God. So apparently within the words of Solomon, or you might say within the words of the scriptures, is contained this deep, mysterious, divine knowledge of God and the fear of the Lord. In other words, as we unpack the scriptures become a medium, as if God is transporting and delivering a greater fear of him and a greater knowledge of him through his word. And as you receive his word and the counsel in his word, you begin to see the depths of God and grow in a proper fear of the Lord. In other words, the fear of the Lord is attached to the knowledge of God, which is delivered through the words of Solomon in this context. Solomon is saying, listen to what I'm saying, and you will see the revelation of God in his word that I'm delivering to you. You will begin to fear the Lord. So apparently, we grow in the fear of God. We discover the fear of God. We seek to understand what it means to fear God and know him, and understanding comes attached to these things. And verse 6, we'll end here, okay? For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding, right? So I should ask the question, wisdom, number one, as there are dogs barking in the background, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. These three ideas apparently are things that God gives. So I should be asking, what is the difference between wisdom, knowledge, and understanding? Are they the same thing? Are they distinct from one another yet connected? And I would say, biblically speaking, if you look at the Hebrew words for wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, you can do your own study on that. But wisdom, very simply, is the application of knowledge, right? Wisdom is how to do things, how to live out knowledge. Knowledge is the what, the data that should lead to a change in life, wisdom. Understanding is the why or the reasoning or the revelation behind the knowledge and behind what it does when I apply it. So you might say wisdom is how, knowledge is what, understanding is why, or making sense of the logistics behind it. Why I'm supposed to, what will it lead to if I do, what will it lead to if I don't, that kind of thing. And so all these things are what God gives. So now when I think about the previous image in the last chapter of wisdom crying out, come and listen, heed my voice, receive counsel, it's really God whose voice we're supposed to be listening to. The wisdom voice, personified as a woman, is very simply like an expression of God. God is crying out to the simple through this wisdom, come and have counsel, come and know me, come and have the fear of the Lord. And so while the wisdom of God can be distinct from God, not independent of God, it doesn't exist without God, but while the wisdom of God can still be distinct from God himself, God is offering his very knowledge of him and a revelation of him and the fear of him through the voice of wisdom. And it's our job to not just recognize wisdom when she's crying out or when there's a situation or an interaction that offers wisdom, but our job is to be receptive, open, humble, and also like actively engaged, like constantly listening. We're very distracted in this world, very distracted. This society and culture is dominated by distractions. And so if we can learn to have an ear for the voice of God, we'll be set up for success. So we'll get into verse 7 in the next Bible study walkthrough. In the meantime, go watch our other videos on our Proverbs Bible study walkthrough. If this was helpful to you, leave a comment. Let me know what specifically stood out to you. And I'd love to know what passage of Scripture you'd like me to tackle next, because I'm taking ideas, and I'd love to hear your recommendations. All right? I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.